Hey guys, before we get started, I wanted to tell you about a free resource on the Scrivener Solutions website. We all know that consistency builds trust, but somehow getting on that consistency train can be hard. Finding the time, thinking of what to say. Oh my goodness, believe me, I feel your pain. I get it. I know all too well the struggle. Sometimes we make things way too complicated for ourselves. You don't need a complicated plan to become consistent with your content marketing. Working that consistency muscle by using a super simple content plan will give you a big win, and you can build upon that. We have a free resource to help you. Go over to scrivenersolutions.com/checklist and download the super simple strategy to jumpstart consistent content creation checklist. Yes, it's a long name, but all you have to remember is scrivenersolutions.com/checklist, and you can get that instant download. Get started on the right foot and make the commitment to consistency. Other things will follow, but consistency really does matter. Start super simple and download the checklist at scrivenersolutions.com/checklist. All right, now on to the show. Hi, I'm Gayla Scrivener, ex-corporate girl and now work-from-anywhere adventure seeker. Creating a work-from-anywhere lifestyle isn't without its challenges, but those challenges certainly don't overshadow all the many benefits. What breaks my heart is seeing folks stuck and unhappy in a career and lifestyle when they want more out of life. I believe that we all have the opportunity to create the life of our dreams and earn a living in fun and creative ways to make our dream lifestyle a reality. You too can experience wonderful adventure and freedom as you live life on your own terms. In this weekly podcast, I share experiences when it comes to growing a lifestyle business through guest interviews, content marketing experience and perspectives, virtual leadership lessons, and I'll even throw in some travel adventures. My hope is through all the interviews, the tips, advice, and personal experience, you'll be inspired and motivated to keep going and creating your dream lifestyle. Life's an adventure. There's no time but the present to live life to the fullest. Hi there, and welcome to the show. I'm glad you're here. This is the second part of my conversation with Genesis Eakes and Linda Guild about the Great Resignation. From what I understand, back in 2019, Texas A&M's Anthony Klotz first coined the term as he predicted a mass voluntary exodus from the workforce. Well, here we are in 2021. After much of us reevaluated what we wanted out of our lives during that 2020 lockdown period. And now we're seeing this prediction come to life. The Great Resignation is what they're calling it. And I'm seeing it everywhere in the news. And if you're tuning in for the first time, welcome, thanks. Or if you missed last week's show, welcome back. But you need to go back and listen to last week's show, because that's where my friends Genesis Eakes and Linda Guild, we got together and we had this really great discussion about the concept of the Great Resignation and how it's affecting our worlds and our friends and family, and just in general, some commentary of what's happening in the work environment. Genesis shared her perspective of what the overall mood or mindset of the workforce is with her firsthand experience with the organizations, she works with. And Linda last week shared great food for thought from both the employee mindset shift perspective and the openness from companies, how they need to embrace different work scenarios. Now, let me tell you a little bit about both Genesis and Linda. They've both been on previous episodes of my show, so you can meet them even more. I'll link to those shows in the show notes. But Genesis is the founder and president of Genesis Eakes International. She consults mission-driven organizations as she brings deep experience in leadership development. She does strategy and high-performance team building and trains and performs workshops for her clients. She works with these organizations, and I love her perspective of what she's seen from a bigger company standpoint. Linda Guild is the founder of the Talented Alliance of Part-Time Professionals, and that is such a cool organization, TAP for short. TAP is a virtual organization that provides a forum and resources for both individuals seeking part-time positions, individuals who are currently working part-time and need resources, as well as it's being a great resource for businesses who employ part-time staff and how that can work into their mix. They provide resources as webinars, discussion boards about such things as career coaching, employment law, tax issues, interviewing tips. I mean, it's such a great resource. And their site also includes a fantastic job board, and it's geared directly to the part-time professionals. If you want to work part-time, great place. If you're an employer that needs part-time work, great place. Love that job board. That's a little bit about Genesis and Linda. You should really get on both of their mailing lists, I'm telling you, and follow them on social. And their links are down there in the show notes. I mean, these show notes for the last week and this week and next week for this series about the Great Resignation, the show notes have a lot of great links for great resources for you. Anyway, I really like what they share and who they are and what they stand for. And I'm not just saying that because they're my friends and my colleagues. They have great things to offer, so flip down there and follow them and check out the resources they have to offer. But anyway, all of us are affected by this great resignation in one way or another. You know, if you're a consumer, for example, which we all are, and we're at our favorite restaurant and our favorite restaurant has reduced seating because they don't have enough staff, or the wait is too long, we're waiting in lines longer. Businesses don't have enough employees to fill the demand of the workload, and they're just struggling to hire. And employees, from the employee's perspective, they're fed up with their current work environment, and they are demanding something more. We're all affected by this, and it's just an interesting and crazy times that we're living in. And what is the secret sauce in finding our new normal when it comes to how our work environment should evolve? I don't know if really any of us really know. We're all figuring it out, right? It's just very, very interesting. A couple of weeks ago, Genesis, Linda, and I got together and we were just talking about what's happening in the market and how it affects our friends and family, how it's affecting us, our clients. And last week, I shared a glimpse of that. Well, today is part 2. I wanted to share how Genesis explains what she means by companies have an overdrawn account when it comes to their team's relationships, and it's causing revolts in the ranks. And then Linda, she had such great insight that she reminds us that whether we're a W-2 employee or we work on our own, we all have bosses. We have to have that perspective that we all have bosses, and we need to figure this out on how we can work all together. I'm going to switch it right over and get right into the discussion. So I hope you enjoy and get as much out of it as I did.
The other day, Genesis, you were talking to us about the connections that are made between people when you're in person, and that when we first pivoted at the beginning of the pandemic, that people were tapping into, and I can't remember the exact term, and it's driving me crazy right now, but that they had all this, in the bank that they were able to draw from. And there was a phrase you used that was great, but I think I'd love you to expand on that because I think it's so relevant to what we're talking about right now, and kind of did that aha moment for me, even if I can't remember the phrase.
Yeah, what we're talking about is literally a relationship account. right? We all have an account. And if you think about it, it's easier to think about something that is soft skills related or intangible, like creating trust, creating connection. If you can put that in more quantifiable terms, in an analogous relationship like a bank account. I know exactly what my bank account looks like at any given time. Thank you to all of the mobile apps that make that possible, right? You have access to that. And I'm like, okay, there's a deposit that was made, that my balance went up. Oh, there was a debit, balance went down. Well, every relationship that we have is similar in nature. We are constantly either making deposits and creating this balance, a positive balance in our relationships, or we're making a withdrawal. And as long as we're on the plus side, we're okay. Right. And so a lot of people had these relationship accounts. We've been building those up, like you were mentioning, Linda, in person. We've been building those up. It's kind of like the things that would happen over lunch. Hey, we went and grabbed a coffee, or we went out to lunch this day, or all of the little intangible things that we did, even helping someone when their arms were full and you helped carry some things for them, you held the door open, whatever those little intangible things are that we do every single day, probably without thinking about it to those people. When we see people in person, those were all of those bank account issues that were building up credit, if you will, for us. And then when the pandemic happened, we were able to, as leaders, if you had any leadership role at all, everybody was making some polls on those relationships saying, hey, we've got to pivot. This is an all hands on deck. We need everything you've got to figure this out and to figure out how do we keep working when literally we shut down overnight. Right. And so there was lots of credibility, and people were like, yes, I'm all in. I'm totally there, because we had enough capital in the relationship bank, if you will, to be able to pull on that. But we've been pulling and making withdrawals for about 18 months. And now what we are seeing is this deficit that is now happening. It's interesting. I had some clients fairly recently where they were just shocked that they had made some requests of some of their team members, and their team members just looked at them and were like, no. And they just stopped. And it was like this shock moment, like, what do you mean no? And because that had never happened before. And I'm hearing it consistently with lots of different clients in different areas, and even just having some conversations with people like you guys, and hearing that it's almost this revolt mentality where the employees are just like, no. And if you're a parent, I liken it kind of like that moment when your child, you know that you've officially hit the terrible twos with your child, and they learn that word, and they just look at you, and this sweet little innocent child that you would do anything for just looks back at you and was like, no. And you're like, I've never heard that before. When did this happen? How did this happen? Why are you exerting your will in this way? And it's kind of like that reaction that employers are having to their employees right now. But the interesting thing about it, Linda, is that, again, to me, opens the door for that part-time possibility. And again, goes back to having a conversation. Is I would love to see the corporate world be able to flip this great resignation on its head and turn it into the great retention. And I think one of the best ways that we can do that is to open up that dialogue. Studies were showing, in fact, there was a study that was done by the Gallup organization just before the pandemic. It was like late 2019. And their study was showing that employees, I want to say the turnover rate was about 27% at that time. Now we are well over that. We're close to 40%, maybe even upwards of that for 2021 alone. But what they were talking about back then, and this was studies that we're talking about pre-pandemic, they said that employees were they were interviewing employees that were saying most of their exodus could have been prevented by a conversation. And the two things that they were looking for their employees to talk to them about were their future in the organization and having good conversations that were relationship building. And they said in the 3 months before they left, not one person had talked to them about their future in the organization, what that looked like, any kind of forward momentum, forward growth opportunities. No one had talked to them about anything like that. And they did not talk to them at all about how they were doing in the company, their current job performance, what that looked like, or any kind of relationship building stuff. So when we are hearing words like employees want to be known, I think they're like, they don't understand me. They're asking to be known. They are asking to be heard. They are asking for a seat at the table to have a conversation, to be able to collaborate together and say, hey, what does my future look like? Do I get a voice in it? Because I want one. And I think that's where part-time really comes in a beautiful way, because I think there's a lot of opportunities for us to create what's next on the other side of this.
Yeah, I think part-time allows for that very targeted piece of it too, so that you're focusing on what you want. But the other pieces that you're saying are so valuable. I mean, I think for part-time, communication has to be the number one, because there's a natural gap in your workflow. If someone in the office only 50% of the same time, if this is a normal office where that's 9 to 5, for example, not a place that's open, 5 a.m. to 11 at night. That's a whole different ball of wax. There's a natural gap that occurs. And I think for the individual, especially, they also have to take that initiative and understand, hey, I've been out. I need to initiate and ask the question, what happened the last 2 days that I need to know? Because bosses forget, and it doesn't mean you're a good leader or a bad leader, right? The best leaders get wrapped up into what they are, and they don't remember that X event happened while that person was out that day. And I think the piece, one of the pieces that you're talking about, and I think as companies become more hybrid, that the capital that does happen in person, that very easy way to get to know people, that you drop by their desk and you comment on some, a picture they might have on their desk, or, walking down the hall, how was your weekend, or that type of thing, that you don't, I noticed this for me, and I'm a tiny team. I don't just pick up the phone on a Monday morning and say to Isabella in North Carolina, hey, how was your weekend? Like we talk, obviously I'm going to ask her how she's doing, but it feels different. Like now it's more intrusive to pick up the phone.
It's meetings, it's structured meetings or structured phone calls. It's like, I don't know where they're at in their space. So if I just call them out of the blue, that's almost, like you said, it's like intrusive and I'm bothering them. But if you're walking by their office and you don't see them with their hand in their head in their hand and really concentrating, then you might say, hey, how was your weekend? So the more casual, more often conversations instead of structure. Genesis, you were saying that poll was pre-pandemic about the feelings that employees were not being heard, something that angered me, I guess, and angered many colleagues, but working for an organization that you leave, that you don't feel heard, you feel, just a number, and the corporate politics were just so much. But they wanted this exit interview. Why on earth would you do an exit interview wondering why all these good people are leaving? Why don't you do something before they actually leave? Hear them before they leave. I'm just saying, to really worry about these exit interviews when they should be working on the problem beforehand.
Well, the interesting part of that is it usually signals where processes are out of alignment. Really and truly, that's what you're talking about, is that their processes are out of alignment. It's probably a incredibly well-meaning human resource department that's saying, hey, we really need this information. Let's find out why employees are leaving. When it's that frontline manager, that direct supervisor, wherever that person happens to be on the hierarchy, but it is that direct supervisor that is the key to all of that information. And if they are not properly trained, if they are not properly, if they don't understand their role and how important their role is. Here's another one of my favorite quotes, and I'm going to forget who said it now. Probably like Peter Drucker or somebody like that. Anyway, but the quote is that people don't leave companies, they leave people. And that's exactly what you're describing, is that these direct supervisors, direct managers, their direct reports, they have so much power. And a lot of times they don't understand how much influence that they actually have towards the outcome. And what I hear over and over again is that, well, I don't have time for that. I have so much on my plate and I don't have time to get into their lives. And oh my gosh, do you realize how much it takes and what it's going to cost me to get personal? And I now have to figure out all of these things. Well, here's another really hard number. Studies have shown, again, and this was so pre-pandemic numbers, they're still yet to come out from 2020. They're still trying to figure out all crunch data, all of that. But pre-2020, it would cost an employer anywhere from half to twice as much of a person's annual salary to replace them. So if you are talking about, so maybe you're talking about an entry-level employee that is making $40,000 or $50,000 a year, you're talking about the very minimum it's going to cost an organization $20,000 to $25,000 to replace them. That's a huge amount. Now, right now, we already mentioned about the labor shortage that is happening right now. And if you talk to anybody in the staffing industry, they're going to tell you that it's more like twice their annual salary. So you're looking at replacing an employee that is costing you $40,000 to $50,000 a year. You're going to pay $80,000 to $100,000 to replace them. So to me, it's simple math. Where do you want to spend your time and energy? Do you want to find the time, reallocate some priorities, and help your managers, your leaders, know how to treat their employees better and to have those good conversations and to help them feel known and heard and to figure out what it means to be a leader? Would you rather spend your resources there, or would you rather spend them on the churn? Because if they are losing employees now, just because we just spent $100,000 and replaced this employee, chances are you're probably going to have to do it again within the next year.
And I think there's a couple of things that I want to add with this is I feel like so many companies don't actually train managers, right? So they bring the person up, you were good at X, and all of a sudden you're managing people. You've never managed anyone. So, I know people that thought, oh, great, I'm a manager. They're going to do all the work.
And I get a raise.
Right. Yeah. The other thing is, I think, and again, it depends on the size of the company, right? So you have the huge ones, so you look at a Starbucks and they're making decisions with people that have actually never been on the front line. They have never been a barista. They have never managed a store, and making decisions that have huge impacts. I used to work with the temporary staffing industry. It's one of my associations. And I knew a couple of the owners that they would periodically just answer the phones because they wanted to know how at least their inside staff was being treated. And that's kind of what I love about like an undercover boss is I think the more that you actually understand what your team does, how they're being treated, what the impact is, the better decisions I think you can make. Then you want to hear their opinion, right? Because they're on the front line of, well, can you be more efficient? Well, I had a woman that called me and needed help logging in. You think that's simple. She's 87. She kept calling, instead of clicking on the login button, she kept clicking on the button for LinkedIn. And it took 24 minutes to help her log in. I can't be more efficient. It's not going to happen. But someone else that I'm working with doesn't know that, right? So they think it's my efficiency, it's my effectiveness, but I'm also creating a relationship with that person by walking them through it. Yeah, I think there's so much gold with what you're saying, Genesis, around leaders understanding in a lot of ways, long-term, their legacy is their people.
Speaking about the relationship bank, we're getting so much underwater because we've got some great employees working, but they're shorthanded. And that stress for so long, it's like, we're 5 down and I'm covering for all these other folks, and enough has to give. It's not necessarily that they want to leave the company, but the stress gets so much. It's like, I need relief. I'm going to go find a different job. It's a sad thing, but they can leave and go to a new job because the starting pay for a lot of folks, that could be a reason for job hopping. And you got to feed your family. You feel like economically you need to leave your company. And then the stress because you're so shorthanded and you're hoping the grass is greener going to someone else. Or you just don't want to work for another company and you think, hey, I can find a whole bunch of clients and overnight I can have this consistent paycheck. With the three of us know it takes time to build a company to have consistency. And then when you have employees, then it's like you've got this whole circle. It's a complex issue.
I think that what's interesting with when you're on your own, having been in the situation that I've been in the same company, but with and without an inside boss, I guess is the way I'll phrase it, right? And I still have my external bosses and my clients are my external bosses. And that dynamic, again, I think from the perspective of, if you look at social media, you'd think that everyone that's ever gone out on their own are now millionaires and they work 4 hours a week and life is hunky-dory. That everyone that you might have as a client is awesome. Well, the same person that, if you were in restaurants before, that was the nasty customer in a restaurant may still be your nasty customer as a client, right? You can have awesome clients, but all of that takes time. And for some people, I think, again, that, why part-time for some of them can be a really great option is whether you want to work for the company that you're currently with and reduce your hours, or you've been at home for a while and you want to get back into the workforce. You can create some of that consistency, but take away one level of stress. And I think having to figure out where that next client is coming from is a level of stress. Or, we're working with someone that's a new consultant and, hey, I haven't been paid. I was supposed to be paid 2 days ago. Well, that's part of being a consultant. Your client necessarily pay you when you think they're going to. And they're not doing it out of maliciousness. They're not, they may have their own cash flow issues. I think that there's so many great options for people, whichever situation you're in, whether you're the leader that Genesis is working with, whether you're the small business owner like me and Gayla, or you're the part-time professional, working on your communication and really figuring out how to connect with other people. One of my friends used to say, build your network before you need it. And, because she would watch people in her industry that would never go to an event, never do anything. And then all of a sudden they would be out of a job for whatever reason. Like they might have chosen to leave. It doesn't have to be something bad happen. And suddenly they're trying to make friends and network. But I think to your point, Genesis, it's that making the connections within your company. It's making connections online so that you can learn from other people too. Because for me, I love having you two and some other people to bounce ideas off of and say, hey, I'm doing this. How does this sound? Right? Because in my head, it sounds great. In someone else's head, they might go, rethink that, right? And if you're part-time and you're figuring out, hey, I have a newborn and a 4-year-old, I'd love to connect with someone else that's figured out how to balance some of this stuff. Or I'm taking care of an older parent, or I want to be able to travel and work part-time. How have you done that, Gayla? How does some of this work? And I think having that network of people to help you and to navigate when things go wrong, because I think one of the reasons, companies forget to reach out as managers, and employees say, it's okay, right? Until it's not. So they also don't initiate it. They don't knock on your door and say, hey, do you have a few minutes? I'd love to talk about this. And I think that's one of the things I'll be curious as we go through this next period, if more employees realize that they need to initiate some of these conversations, that their bosses aren't mean, they're clueless.
They're not aware.
I had a boss that I didn't know his name. He didn't speak to his staff. It was at one of the departments in Massachusetts, so a state one. I got introduced to him. I remember thinking, maybe this is Dr. C, because he's talking to people, but that's not who I thought it was. He literally would walk in, grab his mail, and go to his office. We had 12 people on our team in a big building. He didn't tell people when he was leaving. He didn't, that just was his thing. So as a manager and as a leader, he ran our department. He didn't forge those connections easily. I changed it. I mean, I said good morning, good afternoon, and kind of pushed him to talk to us. And I was only 23 and could get away with it.
Well, you were the force of change. You initiated it. And I think you made a great point. As an employee or as even an independent contractor, freelancer, or whatever, do not always expect the conversation to come from the other. And if you're an employee, don't expect your manager to know everything. There's a lot going on in their mind. And you're right, Linda. We're oblivious to everything else. I manage a virtual team. And when we don't actually see each other, I'm oblivious, thinking in my tunnel vision anyway, even in my past years in an office with a whole bunch of cubicles. So then now with a virtual team, of course, I'm in my own little world. We're all in our own little worlds, whether you're employee or manager, leader, whatever. If you can initiate the conversation and give the ideas, I can tell you from experience that as a manager, I appreciate ideas coming from my team and different perspectives. I really, really like that. I hate being the one that always has to come up with the ideas or feeling that way. And it's like, if there's a modified work schedule or a modified way of doing things because you're thinking about it and want to try it out, don't expect the manager to come up with the idea of your modified work schedule. Having those innovative ideas need to come from everyone. Wow, what were your biggest takeaways? My mind is going, but as Linda mentioned, communication has to be number one in this change that we're seeing in our work environments. Communication, both as employers and employees. It's our responsibility to both convey our ideas, but also we need to open our ears. We need to open our minds and receive the other person's perspective so that we can figure out a compromise, figure something out that we can all prosper in this. Employers can't do things the way that they've always done it. It's just not going to work. And their teams are stretched to the limit. You may be figuring out where you're working, or you may be struggling in your office. Maybe you're a supervisor or running your own business with a small but mighty team or even a big organization, and you want to, leave corporate life and do your own thing. All of these perspectives will help you in your journey. And Genesis has some fantastic resources to help build trust with teams. Whether you're a team of one or a team of a small and mighty team, or you're right now running a team of dozens or hundreds, Genesis has these great resources. I encourage you to go to genesiseeksinternational.com/communication-impact-workshop. That's a mouthful. So the link is in the show notes. What she has to offer is a tailor-made team workshop to fit what the business needs are. And that is really cool. Also, in the show notes, there are some other wonderful communication building downloads and resources. And that includes TAP's Become an Effective Communicator mini course. So you need to check all those out, because I think that during this time, from all perspectives, it serves us well to better our communication skills. Well, next week will be the third and final episode of this series on the Great Resignation. Our conversation concludes as we share from each of our unique perspectives ideas of how to transition into what you want to get out of your work experience. And if you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe because you don't want to miss the new episodes as they publish, and you'll get notified as soon as the episode releases. And don't forget, like I keep saying, don't forget to scroll down to those show notes for all the resources I mentioned in the show, plus more that I had forgotten to mention. Well, thanks for listening, and until next time, have a fantastic week.